A quick follow-up to my video on why I avoid male doctors. This was not my best explained video. Also on YouTube, this was part of an ongoing conversation on TikTok, thus the comment at the top, that I realized did not translate as well over here on YouTube Shorts. I should have provided more context. Brief period of time where YouTube let me reply directly to comments. That was really nice. Would be great if they brought that back, but anyway. I only get the option to voice reply, and who wants to do that on YouTube? Just to answer some main questions. While I told this story and referenced another one, it's definitely not the only time I've been dismissed by male doctors, and I referenced that I've also been overlooked by some woman doctors. And as a matter of fact, a woman nurse saved my life once because a woman doctor was overlooking it. I also gave the example of the positive male doctor at the end because I know there are exceptions. I guess I was not all menning. And there are intentional choices of men who choose to break out of misogyny and men who don't. I emphasize he was Jewish because very often people who are marginalized in some ways are the ones who notice when something is off, because when you are not marginalized in some way, you are very normalized to the system the way it is. Also, from my understanding, from my Jewish friends, study of religion, the Jewish culture really emphasizes asking questions. So he asked a lot more questions of me besides trying to flex like the other doctors had. It was not meant in any way to be anti-Semitic at all. I'm not about that shit. Let's talk about the marginalized people and the normalization of systemic abuse. If you've been following me at all, you know I've talked about the cultural cycles framework a lot. The overall cultural idea influences the institutions like our governments, our laws, our policies, and organizations, how we interact with each other and individuals. A lot of y'all are referencing interpersonal misogyny, and the way I set up the video, again, taking accountability there, only sounded like I was talking about interactions, one-on-one interactions with doctors who are misogynistic. Without saying, again, this was a conversation on TikTok that I should have carried over, I'm also talking about institutions. That's my communication failure. Now, what's going on when we talk about medical misogyny, which is not just anecdotal in my experience? There is research on this. We know women surgeons outperform. We know women get better care from other women. We also know Black folks get better care and are more likely to survive childbirth from Black doctors. There's all this research on this. So if you're in my comments saying, don't just give me anecdotal, give me the data, you can find it. You also have Google, okay? Institutionally, medical schools and our institutions have prioritized only male bodies. Women were not required to be included in a lot of clinical trials, I believe until the 90s. And a lot of funding just last year under your orange fuckboy, our pedophile in chief, just got cut last year on things that would go towards women's health. Because it wasn't fair, in his words, to only have things for women, even though we are substantially behind in understanding women's bodies, and a lot of drugs on the market still have only been tested on men's bodies. So because of this, a lot of medical students, including women medical students, because I believe we now outnumber men in being accepted in medical school, doesn't mean there are more of us in the profession yet, but starting to be accepted more in medical school, are still trained by people on information that we only have on males' bodies. This is where the institutional misogyny comes in. There's also medical racism for the same reason. It is only just now, we are only just now starting to see some medical schools start to talk about what a rash looks like on darker skin. So how could a doctor with even good intentions interpersonally be able to serve a patient with darker skin if they're not trained on it? To do that, they have to intentionally seek out that information that is not already being institutionalized. This is why it's not enough to just not be racist or not be sexist. It's that we have to go that extra mile. And ideally, we demand it institutionally. But there's not the extra labor on individuals, and so that there's a standard of care across the board. Now, people who are marginalized in some way are the ones who tend to notice this right here. So while women doctors can be misogynistic, because we share bodies, there's a higher chance when I have a woman doctor that she's gonna say, no, I've had that happen to me. Or, something's just not right. And I know that even though I was taught something like this, that something's off. And even a doctor who's not a woman, but maybe marginalized in another way, I gave the example of the Jewish doctor, knows that enough people in their own experience have not been included that they're gonna still try some other paths. While if your whole time in an institution has been catered and normalized just to who you are and your identity, you don't even know something is missing. It doesn't even have to be malicious. This is what I work on in organizations. I'm not a physician. This is what I work with in organizations. I give the example of water. With this, I open a lot of presentations with this. We have the idea that culture is an iron. That is helpful for a start. It's helpful to show that, like, some of it's visible, some of it's not. But I disagree with this. Culture isn't the iceberg, it's the water. Because a fish doesn't think about swimming in water. Trust me, I've talked to fish. We don't think of swimming in air until it's gone. You don't realize that something has been catered to you until it isn't. And so that's why when I have the option, I see a woman physician, and clearly I gave an example of a good male one. There are ones that sometimes you can't avoid, because I look for someone who knows that it wasn't all fair, to ask more questions. Because when we end up in someone else's water is often the only times that we notice what is cultural and not just what is inherent. We don't think of our own cultures as cultural. We think of them as the way things are. And this is why a lot of workplaces have unwritten rules, because they just assume, oh, everybody does it this way. We don't have to tell anyone this. We don't have to tell people to speak in corporate jargon or to speak indirectly or to not disagree with the boss, or if you do, to do it this way. Everybody just knows that because that's just professionalism. It's not. It's deeply embedded in culture. From social class cultures to gender to race to even ability status neurodivergence, as I outline in my book. That's the synopsis, y'all. As I say on here all the time, patriarchy is a system, it's not a gender. There are people who will defy the institutional norms, who will seek more understanding. Those are honestly some of my favorite people, because in underrepresented groups, only being aware of your identity doesn't mean you know how to help someone else. So I love people who intentionally learn about other people. And I think those make the best in every single field. From physicians to HR to everything.